let's go to my first guest. Patiently waiting in there, my friend Dave Brown. How's it going?
Wonderful, David. How are you?
Oh, I'm great now that I know that when you came on, I heard your voice, because I was thinking, okay, what could go wrong now except that somebody's mic could be muted.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was muted or unmuted or what. So
It's that new world we've talked about so many times. You probably, you heard me talking about learning about how to make sure our cameras work and microphones and work, all that. You've learned a lot of that. Before we get started, how's things in your world?
Things are pretty good. I thought it was encouraging news from the premier today, and I saw your YouTube broadcast of that. Thanks very much for that. That's encouraging. Our office is still closed, although we're all working from home. Probably, I would guess, for a week after things open up here, just to give us an extra little bit. And we've got a schedule so that not all 5 staff are in the office at the same time. We got it staggered so that I think there's a maximum of 3 of us. We don't have a lot of walk-in donations and whatnot at this time of year. So it's a pretty safe environment for us to work out of, and much easier in a team setting. But by and large, things are pretty good. We're still thrilled with how the 2020 campaign ended up. Some encouraging things for 2021, and lots going on.
Well, last week we had the Family Counseling Center on here, and River City Vineyard was on, and it was nice to hear that they mentioned just how the United Way of Sarnia-Lambton supports them. Talk about those specifically, and then we'll move on with what's happening.
You're right. I, as you know, tuned in last week myself and was really happy to hear the chatter in the chat line about the United Way funding, and of course talking about it online or on air. And that's great for the United Way. Not that we're looking for pats on the back or anything like that, but we know for a fact that donors want to know where their money's going. And I have conversations with donors and volunteers year round. Where's my United Way contribution going? What are you guys doing in this area? And so the more agencies who are funded by the United Way can talk about the United Way funding as a reason for their programming or as a result of our funding, that helps a great deal in help promoting the word. The other thing, of course, it helps is in the fundraising end. If media outlets like the show and Blackburn and Post Media talk about some great programming and some great outcome measures and whatnot, all because of United Way funding, it makes it a lot easier for when they receive that email or that letter in the mail from United Way asking for contributions. They think, all right, I did see a lot in the news the past 6 months about what the United Way is doing right here in our community. So the end result is it's good news for the agencies. I mean, the more that they promote the United Way funding, because we're not like the government where your contribution is like your taxes, where it's automatic or it's something you have to by law. People have choices.
Wouldn't that be great?
But people have choices, and the more that the agencies can promote the United Way funding and their dependence on that, the easier it is for us to raise money, and the more sustainable our funding is going forward.
Yeah. Well, I think it's understandable. Most people who, when they make a donation to a local charity or nonprofit, it's usually attached to their heartstrings in some way. But then there's sometimes too, I think there's people who go, okay, I contribute to, that because that was personal to me, but I want to give more as well. And the United Way kind of makes that an easy choice as well when you're trying to figure out where to put your money. Just go to the United Way. The umbrella that helps so many other organizations, and the United Way is already making those decisions to decide where that money goes, right?
We're really the financial advisor of the charitable sector. That when you support the United Way, those 17 agencies or 35 programs and services are all local. So number one, that's one thing that's top of people's mind. And the other thing is our volunteers go through financial statements and they go through needs study evaluations. We look at key performance indicators. So we know that we're getting value for those contributions. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people who support a particular organization because they personally have been touched by that organization. People who support the community through the United Way want a better community for all of us, whether it's a lower crime rate or less dropout rates, or our homeless are better housed, and suicide prevention is successful here. So that's the main reason why I think people do support the United Way. It's not because necessarily the United Way's programs, but it's all those programs that we fund and that we ensure that it's spent locally.
Yeah, let's break down a bit of a myth about the United Way that I still hear it out there, and I'm quite sure you do. The United Way only supports programs for seniors, right?
Right.
And that's totally not true, right?
Absolutely. About right now, about 29 to 30% goes to support our seniors population, which is vital. I mean, we know that there's about 37.5% of the population is age 55 and above, which is greater than the province of Ontario average, which is 50. So that's a 7.5% difference. But to your point, less than a third of the funding goes to seniors programs. Now, you brought up an interesting point. Every 10 to 12 years, we take a look at the community and the demographics, and we make funding priority changes, and we adjust a little bit how we're funding. And we're in the middle of that process right now going forward. And I can see our United Way spending a little bit more time on basic or emergency services of life. We know that there's been a huge homeless issue, and certainly your guest last week talked about that. We're seeing that more and more people need access to food security that they didn't have before. So I can see us massaging a little bit our areas of focus. And incidentally, that'll be very much in line with the United Way of Canada's focus. Now, as you know, every United Way is local and is autonomous, and they have their own local board of directors who can fund what programs they think are most in need in our community. In our community, it wasn't necessarily what the United Way of Canada philosophy was, but because of COVID and because of just changing demographics, we're starting to see a bit of a shift, and we want to make sure that we're there to help those most vulnerable in our community. So you'll certainly see some news in the next couple of months, I think, of our changing gears a little bit.
Well, it was fantastic to see. I don't mind repeating this. I repeat myself a lot of things, but I don't mind repeating the fact that Sarnia-Lambton really knows how to come together and support all of our nonprofit organizations around. And when somebody needs something, when the need is there, they really know how to come through. And, the government stepped in a little bit to help out the United Way, but the United Way was able to spread that on to some new organizations they hadn't supported before. Do you see those organizations coming back again and looking for help again?
I think so, and that's one of the things that kind of made us realize that now is the time for us to start taking a look at that. When we look at all of the community agencies that applied for community emergency service funds through the federal government, about half of them were funded by United Way, and about half were not. And many of the ones that were not were focusing on those basic essential services for life. And we know that as soon as there's a cure, or as soon as everybody's vaccinated, the problem's not going to go away. There's issues that have really been highlighted because of the pandemic are still going to be here for a long time after. And just because the federal government's ECSF funding is all spent, doesn't mean that issue is done and dealt with and we can move on. So United Way is here for the long haul, as are all of the community agencies, whether we fund them or not. And so we're going to see what we can do to help them further, so that we can continue to look after those who are most in need.
Yeah, well, I mean, even once we can get back out there, there's a lot of recovery to come from what we've just been through to almost 1 year. It's been 11 months, right? What do you mean 2 weeks? Right? But so, it's good to know the United Way is still there to be able to support that and stuff. And, thanks to so many donors in the community, corporate supporters as well. But a lot of that changed for United Way. There was a lot of public events that could happen. We got Sarnia Sting coming up here in just a few moments. Big supporter of the United Way. Absolutely. That had to change as well, right? Did you see any that had to be effective at losing some corporate support, or was it still there?
We received most of the corporate support still. In fact, we actually picked up some brand new corporate support and had some very positive surprises from other companies. So that was certainly there. But you're right, the special events revenue was down. The Sarnia-Sting Junior A Hockey Club have been supporters of the United Way and our community for many, many years, and we're extremely grateful for that. We're hopeful that the traditional United Way Sarnia-Sting black and white hockey game will continue this year, but maybe Jacob will have some encouraging news for us when I'm through. But certainly we started to do the analysis, and what's interesting is we had about 85 brand new donors to the United Way in 2020 than what we've ever had before.
Wow.
Which resulted in about $40,000. That does not include people who donated in other years, but for some reason didn't last year or didn't in 2019, but then came back in 2020. That's in addition to, and as I mentioned, we had a number of donors, corporately and individuals, who gave a second or a third and some even a fourth time in 2020. So, to your point, we know both anecdotally that this is a great community, both in terms of volunteerism and donation and whatnot. But we also know that for a fact when you look at charitable tax returns from Revenue Canada based on income tax. We know that we've got a higher percentage of people of tax filers that make donations in this community than provincially and Canada-wide. And we know that their average and median gifts are bigger in this community than they are elsewhere. Right. So, we all know stories of having people come together, but we also know the stats. And this really is a great community, and I'm just so glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing about the United Way that we always like to point out, folks, is the transparency that United Way has, from their board of directors right through to the staff to the numbers, everything is all available. Mm-hmm. You can go to the unitedway.on.ca to see all the organizations that are supported. You can see the numbers there, and people can still pick up the phone and it'll come right to you, right, Dave, and ask you anything?
Absolutely. Our office will be open, but regardless, you're right. They could call or text me or email, and we're happy to answer any questions. We really believe that the more informed a donor is, the more likely they're going to contribute to the United Way.
Yeah, did the board of directors got to be, and then you still got your staff. You've got your five-person staff, right? Right. What's next for the United Way? Planning for the future? Are you planning in the sense of we might still be locked down again, preparing for that? Because nobody was prepared before. No. Or are you planning to what it's going to look like when we get back? Or what's next steps for United Way?
Well, there's a number of balls in the air right now. Our annual audit will be taking place next week. And that's done by a third-party auditor to make sure all the money that was properly brought in, properly receipted, and is used as the donor intended, and that our costs are low and all that. And that's in preparation for our annual general meeting at the end of March, when we disclose what our financial statements will be for 2020. But there's also a great deal of planning for the 2021 campaign. We've spoken to a number of campaigns who at the last minute went with e-pledging and email donations as opposed to paper. They're likely on board to do the email campaign again this year. So that's been a huge paradigm shift for us last year. We're going to be better prepared for it this year. We've got some other ideas. We've kind of looked at best practices both in Sarnia and elsewhere. Right. So we're going to be far better equipped for that. We're still unsure about some of our events, such as the Day of Caring, which we typically would start to plan the end of March. So if we're probably going to have to make a decision on that in April, whether or not we're able to go ahead with that. And of course, the community investment side, those volunteers are looking at, as we mentioned earlier, taking a look at what our funding focus will be in the next 3 years. In addition to, of course, we're looking at our social media campaign and that kind of planning. And so there's lots going on right now, both wrapping up 2020 and in preparation for 2021.
Right. Well, thanks as always for all your efforts to you and your staff, your team, for keeping us informed. I love having you here every month to keep us updated. Real quick before I move on, any final thoughts, Dave?
It's always a pleasure to join you, David, on the show and to talk to you and your viewers about the United Way, some of the things that we're doing, and it really is a pleasure, and I look forward to coming back. I think the end of next month, just prior to our annual general meeting, to talk about some of the activities and maybe some of the decisions we've made at that time.
Fantastic, Dave. Always a pleasure myself to talk to you, and we'll look forward to next month.
You bet. Thank you.
Dave Brown, Executive Director from United Way Sarnia-Lambton, and always a pleasure, really, to have a good chat with him. We have him back here every month for a reason. We want you to understand the importance of the United Way and just how they do things and where your dollars are going to and how they're being spent and looked after. So we do appreciate Dave taking that time to be back.